As we're waiting for people to register, the registration page is now open and people will be registering very shortly. Well, it's 1 minute to 7. I think what we'll do is we'll start to look at having the webinar kicked off. What I'd like to do is, of course, mention to everybody as you're registering that the webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our national YouTube site, so you can watch it at a later date and share it with your colleagues, friends, or your school, indeed, if that be the case, or your teachers. But let's talk about that more in a moment. Tonight's webinar, of course, is by Christian Voice Australia, and we run the National Webinar Ministry, where we talk to Christian and business leaders in Australia and indeed overseas. And we have a very healthy program lined up in the next month or two. One of the issues I'd like to talk to both Michelle and Terry about tonight will be that we have a very much a growth rate, if I can put it this to you, in the ABC News recently, and you can see the date there, October 2021, just over a year ago. Homeschool registrations rising in Australia. Alternative education advocates say mainstream schools need a shake-up. So that's coming from the ABC, which I find astounding. But there it is. They're reporting that homeschooling is indeed on the rise. Well, tonight, of course, we've got two wonderful speakers. And, of course, we've got Australian Christian Homeschooling, Terry Harding, and My Homeschool with Michelle Morrow. And, of course, as I said, it is indeed hosted by Christian Voice Australia. The format tonight will be that I'll hand over to Terry, who will speak for about 15 minutes or so. And then I'm going to hand over to Michelle, who'll speak for about 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. And then I'm going to have a question and answer session. And please, down the bottom, you'll notice that there is an icon there that allows you to ask a question. So please type your question in, and then I will endeavour to have those asked by me to both Terry and Michelle. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass over to Terry Harding. So Terry, please take control and over to you. But while you're doing that, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that Terry is indeed the manager of Australian Homeschooling and ACHS, Australian Christian Homeschooling, where the work has been recognised nationally, and I know that I've had a lot of representation to have Terry on the program. So Terry, over to you. Tell us about homeschooling and in particular Christian homeschooling and how it's shaping up from your end. Over to you, Terry, and welcome.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Greg, and hi, Michelle, and everyone listening and viewing. My name's Terry Harding. I am a advocate for homeschooling. My wife and I homeschooled our 5 children for over 20 years, and we now have 10 grandchildren, and some of them are homeschooling. And I've had experience in schools. I've been principal of 5 schools over many years. I've been the manager of Australian Christian Homeschooling since 1994. And I've looked into homeschooling from the point of view of scholarly research at Queensland University of Technology, doing a master's in research and then finally a doctorate. So having said all those bits and pieces about myself, the real issue is that my heart is for homeschooling. And I think that homeschoolers around the country are the champion educators of Australia. But anyway, my job right now is to talk a little bit about homeschooling. And I thought also to mention to use some of the stats regarding homeschooling growth, but to kick off initially to look at just the state of education in very general terms as we look at it in Australia. So let's see if we can get this moving. All right. It's not, oh, there we go. It's moving. Great. Now, in Australia, we've had concerns about academics in schools. There are 4 million school students in Australia, as you can see that figure up on your screen, and there are 9,614 schools across the nation. And there's a lot of concern with respect to poor academics. Now, we're not here as homeschoolers to bash schooling. There are some great schools in this country, but we are here to tell parents that there is an alternative on the Australian educational landscape, and some people really do need an alternative. So please, let's just get that straight. We're not anti-school, but we certainly want to advocate this freedom-loving homeschooling movement that's growing massively. So I've just listed a couple of research points that demonstrate we've got some real problems with our academics in Australia. The AERO, Australian Educational Research Organisation, has found a significant percentage of Year 9 teenagers who are writing at Year 3 level, and half as many Year 9 students excelled in their writing as those who excelled way back in 2011. Now, here we have all the NAPLAN issues ahead of us. We find that on NAPLAN Day this year, 25% of school students were withdrawn on the test day. Leave that to you to make up your thoughts about why that would happen, but kids were withdrawn massively. Nonetheless, the ones that were tested, we found, again, problematic scores among our Australian school students, years 3, 5, 7, and 9 are the cohorts that are tested each year. So here's one of the stats that just basically says 13.5% of those Year 9 kids did not achieve minimum standards in terms of their literacy. So there are concerns on the international scale as well about our academics in Australia. The progress in international reading literacy study, it's called PEARLS, demonstrated that there were problems with our teenagers. Now, since 2003, we've been looking in the PEARLS study, our 15-year-old school students compared with 76 other countries around the world. And we have been down from 11th level in 2003 to the 29th level in maths, down from 8th level in 2003 to the 16th level in science, and on it goes. Literacy as well, from 4th down to 16th. The PISA, now many would probably have heard of the PISA tests, similar deal, and again in 79 countries, and we find that Australian kids don't rank highly despite Julia Gillard's promise when she inaugurated in 2003 the Australian curriculum. So we ranked 29th in maths and 17th in science and 16th in reading. So here we have this NAPLAN national curriculum, and I've already said that when Julia was the minister, she inaugurated this whole process. Then we're up to version number 9. So it's had 9 changes since then, and we still have problems. And within the curriculum itself, our children across this nation are being taught that there is largely just a materialist focus on life. There's no spiritual matter. It's all about what you can touch and taste and see. God is right out of the picture. We have an emphasis on the philosophies of Marxism, which again ties in to the materialism idea. We got the idea in our school and across the nation, basically, that relativism is the way for our children to think, that there are no absolutes. It rejects the idea of a truth. It rejects the idea of meaning or a grand narrative. And as a Christian, I see us in a grand narrative. It's called God's plan, and that people throughout history fit, and they have their meaning and purpose from that. Anyway, just quickly whip through this. I'm sure many of you are aware of the identity politics of race, gender, and sexual behaviour being advocated across the schools. There's confusion about our sexuality. There's promiscuity encouraged. And here's one that really gets to me. There's a sense of eliminating our history, not being proud of our history, and children in schools being shamed for being Australian. It's a big issue. We won't dwell on this. I just want to raise it. That's all. Critical race theory, racial hatred, division, and guilt in this, our great nation. So, and the taxpayers paying for this. It's crazy. And green ideology, which is being rammed down the throats of our kids. Now, looking at schools, we've just looked at the curriculum and the testing outside. Looking inside the schools, right now, this very moment, there is a Senate inquiry, and it's looking at the disorderly classrooms of Australia. It's unbelievable that the Senate of Australia is looking at it. It's called, the inquiry, if you want to look it up, is the issue of increasing disruption in Australian school classrooms. Fancy the Senate having to look into that. Here are a number of quotes from that inquiry. The number of teachers feeling unsafe has risen from around 1/5 in 2019 to around a quarter in 2022. And that the primary reason that teachers give for these concerns is the students. Teachers are being attacked, choked, fearful, sick leave, lots of that. Teachers leaving the profession, feeling unsafe. Here's one lady who said, I've had to confiscate knives from students and I've been punched in the stomach while pregnant by a student. Okay, again, just to reiterate and bring balance, we're not here to bag schools. All we're trying to say is that there are things happening in schools that are unacceptable to many parents, and that there is an alternative. That's all we're trying to say. And we talk about the reports in sexual, emotional attacks from teachers. It's just ongoing. Now, Christianity has been at the forefront of encouraging education and literacy way down the ages. You could even start at 1440 BC with the 10 Commandments being written down. But look, I'll just say this, that literacy has been a big focus of Christianity because of the Bible being in the literate form, in the written form. So I want to share with you, as we move into the homeschooling side of my little talk, some of the biblical injunctions as to why we parents should be teaching God's things and God's ways, and that God himself has really given a requirement for parents to teach. So here's the famous one that all homeschoolers who are Christians should know off by heart. It says here, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. And it says this to parents, not the kids. You, not the children, shall love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. So God's saying, God's words go into your heart, not the kids, into the parents. And it says, you, the parents, shall teach them, that is the words of God, diligently, not haphazardly, but teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them in the 4 periods of the day, which are when you're sitting in your house, it's when I'm having a meal with my kids or watching a bit of telly or relaxing. When you walk by the way, there's business hours, the normal sunny times of the day. And of course, when you lie down, when you rise up. So that's just a primary scripture that talks about the injunction to parents to educate their kids. Now, many Aussie parents delegate that downwards, that responsibility, they delegate that downwards to the Minister of Education, and then that means enrolling the child in school. That's fine, as long as the parents feel that they are fulfilling that injunction from God to teach the kids the beautiful things of God and to have them changed and obedient and learning and growing in the things of God. There are other scriptures I've got there, Psalm 78. For the sake of time, I don't think I'll go through them all, but I'll just have them up there. You can take notes down if you wish. Psalm 78, verses 2 and 4, and Proverbs 1 and 8. Here's a good one for parents. Hear the instruction of your father. Do not forsake the law of your mother. Proverbs 22 and 6. Most Christians would know that. And if you're not a Christian, doesn't matter. You're still a parent. You have the kids. It's up to you to teach them the right way to live. So train up a child in the way he should go. And when he was old, he will not depart from it. And finally, in the New Testament, again, an injunction. And I call this a focus to the theology of sexuality. This is not just, the homeschooling movement is not just a movement for mothers. It's for parents, mums and dads. And so here's the injunction in Ephesians 6 and 4. You fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. So, homeschooling, Christianity, it's not just for the females, for the ladies and the little girls. It's for all people. It's for boys and girls, for mums and dads to participate in. So I just have, this is my last quote, and I'm just going to read it out. It's one of the best pieces of text to describe the authority that God has given to parents, and it's this: the right and duty of parents to give education is essential, since it is connected with the transmission of human life. It is original and primary with regard to the educational role of others on account of the uniqueness of the loving relationship between parents and children. And it is irreplaceable and inalienable, and therefore incapable of being entirely delegated to others or usurped by others. And that was written by Pope John Paul II, Familiaris Concertio, and it's a brilliant piece of text that I use a lot to help people to see the responsibility and that God has put this to parents because they gave life to the kids, and so they'll teach life to the kids. Now, it doesn't mean you can't, as a Christian person, you can't send your child to a school, as I said earlier. But John Paul makes this point that the relationship between the parent and the child is irreplaceable. As a parent, I share genetic history with my children. I'd share our hereditary, the ancestors, our daily experiences, our thoughts, our problems, our loves, our joys, our grandparents, relatives. You share our psychological values, our Christian values. That relationship's irreplaceable, even if you have a great school teacher. Anyway, we shall continue. We'll get on to where we want to go, because Greg was talking about the growth. Now, I did some original research here to demonstrate the growth in Australia since 2018 to 2022, the growth of registered homeschoolers in Australia. And the growth is absolutely phenomenal. Over the 5 years, the growth in registered homeschoolers. Now, a lot of homeschoolers don't register, so we don't know how many there are, but just the ones that register with their state or their territory education department, that's what's on this graph in front of you. And I won't go through all of it, but just for the sake of time so we can move on, but it's grown by 110% over 5 years. And I will, if you don't mind, just refer you to the last two columns, the 2021 column and the 2022 column over there on that right-hand side. Look at the bottom of that, those numbers. In 2021, the total Australian numbers of homeschool kids who were registered with the education departments around the country was 28,901. The next year, 2022, it was 42,452. It's unreal. And so I just graphed that. Have a look at this one here, where you see over the same 5-year period, you've got your blue is 2018, your green is 2021, and your orange is 2022. But just look at the jump in the total column on that orange one. So the jump between on the total column only, I'm looking at on the right-hand side, the green one is 2021 and the orange one is 2022. It's a massive growth. So why did you choose homeschooling? I just put this in, Greg, just to show viewers my recent research, which I will publish this year, God willing. And I've asked Australian Christian homeschoolers, why did you start homeschooling? And I got a whole lot of data. People typed it in and wrote all their reasoning in. And I just want to direct you from the left-hand side, the grey boxes. The written expressions were converted into key statements, and that I converted into 74 different pools of meaning. Jump across to the coloured ones, and we start to get a crystallization of the reasons why they have chosen homeschooling. The yellow one, is all about government ideologies, government theories, fads, political ideas. And I can read some of them out to you tonight if we've got time. They're just phenomenal. One person said, radical gender theory, critical race theory, leftist woke political agenda. Another one said, zero trust in government education. And on it goes, destroying Christian values. The yellow one. Then in the second yellow one, there was a lot of concern about the COVID policies. So I grouped those two groups, government fads and ideologies and government COVID policies. I bundled them together over on the far right, the yellow. I just called it people are homeschooling because of the government and their policies. Down to the orange ones, the parents said, we had problem teachers, we had problem classrooms, we had poor education. You wouldn't believe some of the things that the parents wrote about. My daughter witnessed boys punching, breaking windows and throwing chairs, and the teachers had no power over it. I had also a couple of people, and I'll see if I can get them quickly up for you, basically saying my young fellow was innocent and he had dyslexia, which could not be addressed by the school. At the end of his first year, my bright, delightful, intelligent child felt that he was stupid and wanted to die. There are numbers of parents who said the children were bullied and there was the people wanting to commit suicide, all sorts of things. And parents said, well, we're going to homeschool. Now, I've got those as push factors. I'll talk about that in a minute. There are positive reasons for homeschooling as well. The blue one there says the home is a great environment for learning. And parents talked about how their kids started loving learning, no stress, and natural and flexible. And so that was the next reason. The final next reason after that was parental responsibility. Parents are saying, hey, I'm a parent. I'm choosing to be with my kids and educate them. There was the green one, which is the religious one, where parents said, oh, we're Christians. We want to have a religion incorporating the kids' education so that they have, kids have got spirits, so their spirits need to be nurtured as well. And the final one, which was a very big category, it was all about the child's well-being, their special needs. And I just put concerns to the child. So essentially, the six reasons, government policies that were unacceptable, school environment unacceptable. And I called them push factors that push kids out of schooling, pushed parents out of schooling, pushed parents said we can't have faith in this. And the other four over toward the right, how good the home environment is. I'm a parent, I should do this. I have religious reasons and I've got concerns for my special needs of my child. I call them the pull factors that pull them in to the family home. People say, oh, what about socialization? And I always say, well, what do you mean by socialization? They can never tell me. So anyway, I've just got an academic who's put a great socialization definition, and it's Professor Durkin. He said the socialization for your child and my child, right? It's the process whereby people acquire the rules of behavior and systems, beliefs, and attitudes that equip a person to function effectively as a member of a particular society. Now, again, I've got no problem with schools, but it is an artificial environment where the child is locked into a peer group for 13 years and they have to toe the line for 6 hours a day, for 5 days of the week, for 4 terms of the year, and they get graded upwards for 13 years. And so their kids are restricted socially to an age group, and they're not allowed to expand that social attraction to olders and youngers. Anyway, that's a very, very powerful question. People always say, oh, socialization is so important and your kids aren't going to school. Well, they're assuming that our schools are brim full of positive social experiences, which if you read the research that I've got here, it's not always the case. So we'll just look ahead. There's a very famous experiment done by Professor Shires in 92, and he had his PhD students in a room with 70 kids who were homeschooled, and in another room, 70 kids that were traditionally schooled. And he decided that if a child does something naughty, that would be problem behavior. And he said normal human beings, as a psychologist said, normal human beings have problem behavior rating between 1 naughty thing up to 6. Anything outside of 6 is starting to become aberrant behavior. So if you look at the chart, on the first lot were the boys and girls who were 8-year-old kids, and he found the boys did 4 things that were unacceptable. The girls, a little bit better, nice girls, 2 things that were unacceptable. But the traditionally schooled kids, the boys were doing 16 negative things, and the girls 21 negative things, whereas the norm was 1 to 6. And same feature with the 9-year-olds, the male homeschool kids, the boys 4, the girls 1, the traditionally schooled kids 16 and 15. And so too for the 10-year-olds. And Professor Shires basically said, not speaking against schools, but he's saying that children that are trained in that environment, locked in with their age peers, they have to have violence or untoward behavior as a coping mechanism. So quite interesting. Just finishing up, people say, can they get into uni? One thing is about socialization. The next thing, what about tertiary? And I'll just say yes, absolutely, yes, 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 and yes. And maybe some of the people might want to ask Michelle or I about that in a minute. Anyway, that's a study I did of 438 Australian Christian homeschooling graduates. And we find here the blue pie, it says 36% got into universities. And this is Australia-wide, not just one state. 36% were doing bachelor degrees after their homeschooling, 21% doing diplomas, and 43% doing apprenticeships or traineeships. So it just puts to bed those old myths that kids can't be socialized, kids can't get into uni, kids can't write essays or do maths, and it's quite the opposite. So there you go, I'll finish up. So Michelle, I'll give you a go. But there's some details of Australian Christian homeschooling. We're not the only form of homeschooling. My research has shown there are 3 types of homeschooling. Number 1 is a structured type, which is where the curriculum is all structured and the kids can just do the work at home. But that's not the only part of structured homeschooling. There's also they're also watching movies, going to sports, doing choirs, and all sorts of things, reading books. But that's the structured lot. The second group are the eclectic group. They will go and buy books, and of course everybody's got the internet access. And the third group are the unschoolers or natural learners who go with child-directed interests. So anyway, that's our lot, which is Australian Christian homeschooling. We've seen tens of thousands of students and families in Australia and overseas since 1982, and it's been my privilege to be there since 94. There you go, Greg. That's
Thank you, Terry. Can you share, hand over your screen? Yep.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, now, and we should, perfect. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Morrow, who is the director and founder of My Home School. Now, I read a bit about you, Michelle, and I was fascinated about your own homeschooling of your children. And maybe you could tell us, but I'm fascinated that I went to university. And look, I'll let you talk about it, but I'm really interested in what you have to share with us and what you're doing in the area of homeschooling. Over to you, Michelle.
Well, thanks, Greg, for having me on. And Terry, everything Terry said, I 100% agree with. Homeschooling is growing. I think that it's probably dropped off a tiny bit since COVID, because some of the people are trying school again, I think. But we've definitely retained a lot of those families who chose homeschooling because of COVID. I'll tell you my story. One of the things that Terry said was, it's a family affair, homeschooling. And back in 1995, my husband and I went to visit some friends, and they said that they were going to homeschool their kids. And I was like, oh, who would do that? They're crazy. There's perfectly good schools. I'd never even heard of homeschooling. And they gave us a book by Ray Moore. You probably know that book, Terry. And my husband became the one to want to homeschool. And he was saying, I think we should homeschool. This is a great idea. And I'm like, yeah, fine for you. You go to work every day, and I'm the one who's going to have to homeschool. But I read the book as well. It was called Homeschool Burnout. Then I think it's got another name now, but it's a very old book. It probably wouldn't. There's newer books since then, and I thought, yeah, actually, I think I will. Better late than early was one of his things. Start them a bit later. Start them when they're about 8. And so I thought, okay, I could do it for 2 years. I'll agree to do it for 2 years, and we'll send my son to school when he's 8. So I had 4 kids, and so we started, and then we loved it. And I thought, oh, I sort of knew my kids were doing well, and then there was a lot of pressure from it's hard homeschooling 4 kids. I had 4. My oldest was 6 when I had my 4th child, so it was pretty full on, and I was always feeling like I wasn't doing a good job because it was pretty hectic. And so we did sort of experiment with school with the first 2, and then I put my oldest son in a very sort of posh private school for a test, because they didn't have any vacancies, but they had a test coming up for gifted and talented kids. And I had rung the school that day, and they said, well, actually, we haven't got any vacancies, but tomorrow we have a test for gifted and talented kids. Would you like to do that? And my son's never done a test. He's like 9 years old. And I thought, oh, if it's the only way I can get into the school, might as well do it. So I said to my son, do you want to do that? And he said, oh, yeah, because his friend went to that school. So he did the test, and he came 2nd and 3rd against all these private school kids who were going for gifted and talented. And I thought, gosh, it just made me not want to go to school, because I thought, if I'm getting that result without even trying, and there's been no coaching on testing or anything, he had 24 hours notice, I think I'll keep going with this. And so I just kept going, and we did have my oldest son did go to school again for a brief period when and then he came home again. But anyway, the 2 oldest went to school a couple of times. Like, one went for a year and the other one went for 3 years. But they all came back. None of them went to did their HSC. I'm in New South Wales. Or got an ATAR. They all went to university at 16 years old. And my oldest son is a doctor. He's 20, 26, 27 now. And my other daughter, she's got a master's in education, and she's actually she's a teacher now, and she also helps with my business. And my other son, he has a master's in 3D animation, which he got into the master's with a portfolio. He'd done a diploma, but he skipped the degree altogether and got in with a diploma. So there's many pathways to university. You don't need to, just go through the regular paths that they often say you do. And my other daughter, she's got a master's in business. She helps with me, and she's like an entrepreneur. She has her own business, and I think that homeschooling was the best decision that we ever made, and our kids also are all really glad that they were homeschooled. And like Terry said, socialization is not a problem. They've all got friends. 2 of the girls are married. It's not an issue like people think it is, but you're able to have a bit more choice over how your children are socializing, and that's what's wonderful. You also have an opportunity to give them the worldview that you want. So all those things that are in the Australian curriculum, I mean, Terry would know that you have to some extent follow what in New South Wales particularly, you have to follow the Australian curriculum or New South Wales syllabus, but you get to teach it how you want it. So if you have to teach evolution, or you have to treat critical race theory, or not, that it's kind of hidden in the curriculum, so it would depend on the teacher how it gets presented. If you want to teach all these things, you get to teach it from your worldview, and you get to give them your point of view. So you're not at the mercy of whatever that teacher thinks of how she wants to implement those ideas. And I think that homeschooling just gives us so many opportunities to follow our kids' dreams as well, because all of my kids are so different. The one who has the 3D animation, he works for Netflix as an artist. So I had 4 different children, and they were all able to follow their own pathways, and homeschooling never held us back. So that's what I like to always tell parents. It's funny how many people with 5-year-olds will come to you and say, well, what about university? Will my child get into university? And I always say, well, it doesn't really matter at 5. Let's have that conversation when they're 15 or 14, but at 5 you really got no worries. The way the school system is set up, you don't have to start prepping for that sort of thing until they're about 14 or 15 anyway. So yeah, so that's kind of the main things I would say. If you want to ask some questions.
Yeah, just quickly, Michelle, you run My Homeschool, so do you provide curriculum material for people interested in homeschooling?
Yeah, so when I got into homeschooling, I was sort of, I started being, like, I was a mummy blogger. And so I started sort of blogging, because there was a lot of the stuff in Australia was, we didn't have the internet then, and we had.
Oh, you're not that old, Michelle.
I am that old. And so, we had catalogs and things like that. And there was a lot of, the material was American then. And so we didn't have a lot of Australian content. And so I started sort of talking about how you could make Australian content. And then a friend and I, we sort of said, oh, wouldn't it be good if there was this, but it was Australian, and wouldn't it be? And so we got into, the way I homeschool is called the Charlotte Mason method, which is, like Terry said, it's kind of traditional in that you follow, you use books and things like that, but you don't use textbooks. You use more literature books and reading. And anyway, you can look that up if you're interested. But because I was sort of blogging about that, people started saying, oh, what about, could you help us with this? And so I blogged from 2016 to about 2017, and was providing, work workbooks and things like that to help. And then people kept asking, you know, how do you put the whole curriculum in New South Wales? It's quite, you know, difficult to well, it's not difficult, but you just have to spend a bit of time working out what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's, I sort of worked out a way to provide it for New South Wales, which is kind of the hardest state to provide for. And then another girl joined me, Jo Lloyd, and we started sort of writing grades, and then it just sort of took off from there. And so now we provide all the way from K to 10 curriculum.
Yeah. So over to you, Terry. Just a quick question again, because I was a school teacher early in my career, and does the homeschooling mirror the New South Wales curriculum, for example, or the Queensland, or how does it? I mean, do you follow the curriculum in order to get, for example, what we have, like the higher school certificate or whatever else it might be? Terry, can you comment on that?
Sure. What we do in Australian Christian homeschooling, we use an Australianised version of accelerated Christian education. Much of it's printed in the US, but the Australian history, the maths, the geography is done in Australia. And so we show how, and we give our families, we give them documents that show how the curriculum that they're using fits with their various state requirements.
Right.
Okay. Now, some states do not have a curriculum requirement. Victoria is an example. They say they do not have a requirement that homeschoolers follow the Australian curriculum or the Victorian one. So it varies from state to state.
Right.
But we basically say, parents, you need to decide what you want to teach your children, whether it's a structured way that we provide or Charlotte Mason or whatever. And then it's a skill, but you can show how it satisfies various state requirements. And see, homeschooling is not just about books and book work.
No.
You know, there are many other activities, social and sporting, and all that can go down onto an application for registration in your various territory or state, and that will be approved. So there's no need to fear or worry or fear that you have to teach something that's contrary to the family's view.
Okay. That's the important key, I think. And one of the reasons I suspect a lot of parents have chosen homeschooling. But in terms of once you've finished the homeschooling, the transition to university is fairly straightforward. Is that correct, Terry, Michelle? Is that right?
Well, it depends what pathway you're choosing. I mean, if you want to be a doctor, then you have to, you know, jump certain hoops to get that. If you want to, I mean, to get into like a Bachelor of Arts, that's pretty easy. Like, but if you wanted to be a vet, but getting into law, that's pretty easy. It depends on, you just have to start, you have to work backwards. So you have to pick what it is that you're wanting to do, and then you have to find out how you get the criteria. I know one of my friends who, and I don't know if this is still the case because this was a few years ago, but to get into the Air Force, they did require you do an HSC. And so they did have to go to TAFE, you know, for 17 and 18 to get an HSC. So it just depends what you want to do. Okay.
It's important to note too that before COVID and since COVID even more so, universities, how to put this delicately, they make money by customers being there. And so it's getting your children into a university course, as Michelle has said, tailor it to the specific course, but they are looking out for customers, particularly given with the Asian students being away for nearly 2-3 years now because of COVID. They're starting to come back, but alternative tertiary pathways are there for anybody to pursue.
Yeah, and there's Open University, which is what we used,
Mm.
is a great way. You know, my son did a 1 year of a science degree and then applied for, use that mark for getting into his medical degree. So he was still 18 when he started medicine. But when people ask me, how did you get into that? I say, oh, credit card. You know, that was the only requirement I needed. So, yeah, it's not hard.
Okay.
University is very easy.
All right. Now, I've got another quick question, which is always asked of me, in particular when I was having you two appear. There's homeschooling, there's distance education, there's correspondence school. What is the difference? Somebody help me out.
I wrote a paper on this last year and it's published. There are 3 modes, not 4. There is a school. Now, a school is registered in its state or territory, and the basic legal status is that the school is responsible for the child's learning. Distance education, and I've set up 3 of these in 3 different states. Distance education is just like a school in terms of legality. If you're doing distance education, that child is enrolled in a school and the school is responsible for the learning of that child, not the parent. And you would have to comply with that distance education school's curriculum and their timeframes and their assessment processes. So and you mentioned, so there's that
Correspondence schools,
correspondence, that's the same. It's correspondence school of the air. Now there are other names for it, online learning, all of that. It's a school. And the third category is what we're discussing tonight, which is homeschooling or home education. It's called various names in different states. But the legal position there is that the parent is responsible for the child's learning. So they're the fundamental different ones, different normal aspects of Australian education. But there's one new one, which is COVID lockdowns and remote learning, where the student has been enrolled in that school, but COVID has forced them out of the school. So the kids are excluded from the school. They're back in home and they're doing some sort of a hybrid, quickly put together learning program. And you know, some schools did it reasonably well. Other schools did terribly in that, but they did their best and the teachers were under a lot of pressure. But that is not homeschooling.
No.
And it's not distance education. It's a sort of a just-in-time solution for a problem that the government's faced.
Okay. Well, interestingly, sorry, Michelle, go on.
I was going to say, so like Terry said, so a lot of parents that say, oh, I did homeschooling during COVID and I hated it. They weren't really homeschooling anyway. So it's not a good gauge, but the ones that did sort of often take it off the school and just think, well, the Zoom meetings and everything isn't that good. We'll sort of try to do our own thing. They're the ones that probably started homeschooling because they really liked it and their kids liked it.
There was an academic in Sydney, Brunker is her name, education lecturer, and she was vehement saying what's happened in COVID is nothing to do with homeschooling. It's an insult to homeschoolers and an insult to teachers. But one of the big differences, a parent can say, I want to homeschool, and another parent can say, I want to do distance ed. Both of those parents are doing it voluntarily. Both of those parents, whether it's homeschooling or distance ed, both are getting the resources, they're figuring out how to do it and all of that. Whereas the COVID lockdown thing was imposed upon people who didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
They were forced.
Interestingly, just for the sake of the discussion, I did my Bachelor of Economics at Sydney University, my diploma in education at Sydney University, I did my master's in education at New South Wales University, but I did my MBA by distance education at Charles Sturt. And you know what? You can do it. You can work from, you can do it as a home student, if you know what I mean. So I think there's a lot going for that sort of educate, which is what you're doing. Now, the next question, which I've been asked, sent to me, is woke education. Now, I saw your data, Terry, and you might like to comment too, Michelle. Is that rating more and more as to why parents are choosing home education because of the woke system, you know, the teachers, you know, with the woke education, that the ideology, to what degree is that a reason why parents are choosing more to home educate? Homeschool, yeah.
I'll kick that one off.
Okay.
In the research piece I started last year, I made a split between those who were enrolled in homeschooling pre-COVID and those who were enrolled after COVID. And because Australian Christian Homeschooling is a Christian group, so lots of Christians, not all are Christians, many are, you know, atheists or of different religions. We don't mind, but the emphasis on the ones pre COVID, there was a strong emphasis in the 6 of those categories I showed you, and there was a strong religious emphasis.
Yep.
Post-COVID, there was still a very strong religious emphasis, but there was a far greater concern about the things you've just mentioned, Greg. You know, the government policies, the critical race theory, all of the woke issues came up a lot. And in one of the families just said, I had no other choice. I had to homeschool. I liked my school, but my kids were coming home with rubbish, and we just had no other choice. Anyway, Michelle, take it away.
Yeah, I would. Well, the thing is, homeschooling has become very popular it's always been popular amongst Christians, but it has become popular amongst the secular educators as well. And so they wouldn't say they are homeschooling because it's woke, because they're pretty woke themselves. So I wouldn't say that is an issue there, but certainly amongst the Christian community, we definitely have, you know, a conservative viewpoint, and because of that, there are a lot of things that are ringing alarm bells for parents. But I think it will get worse. I think, you know, we're hearing a lot about them trying to change some of the laws so that Christian schools can't employ Christians. And I think that, you know, I think there's a lot of parents seeing homeschooling as a choice that they will make if they have to. But at the moment, I think, you know, within the Christian school movement, that they can still, you know, raise their children with their Christian values. So although we do hear, I think vaccination was a real issue for a lot of parents were ringing us saying, you know, I'm just going to homeschool because I don't want, because we're not vaccinated. But, and occasionally I hear the types of things that Terry's saying, but that's a conversation that parents are having, and they've still got their kids in school, but they're in a Christian school. So they're kind of worried about how it's going to go, and that they might have to homeschool if things do change. But
yeah, interesting. I just read an article, I think it was over the weekend, where a school in Utah, the USA, had withdrawn the Bible from their library. Now, that's the kind of thing parents are telling me every day. Why do we have to put up with this? You know, so they are looking at alternatives, Michelle. And it's sad when the Bible, which is the foundation for society, you know, Judeo-Christian society, is withdrawn from a school library. So that's because, and it was a complaint by one parent only. So it's interesting. So they're the kind of reasons I'm getting sent.
One thing that
Yes.
a key word, I think, that pushes people over the line to homeschool, apart from the fact if you just want to just do it because you just feel God's calling you or you love being with your kids, but the key word is necessity. People are saying necessity. I want to share with you, I'm trying to present this around the country.
Yep.
First formal schooling in Australia was homeschooling.
Yep, correct.
1788, 1789, Isabel Rossin was educating children of the convicts for nothing in her home. And it was like a sort of a school, but she was charging some money for children of the military. Thomas McQueen in Norfolk Island and Mary Johnson in Parramatta, et cetera, et cetera. So just to let people know, this is not, it's not the new factor. We're not the new kid on the block in that sense. And Richard Johnson, the first minister, homeschooled his children. The second minister, Samuel Marsden and his wife, they home educated their kids, and she wrote back to England saying, I'm doing this because there is no school and I have to do it, necessity. And today there is a sense of necessity among some parents. Some parents, as Michelle said, they're happy. They don't mind the government imposed ideologies that are changing curriculum. They don't mind that. But there are others who've said, well, I had no other choice. Just one other thing too, I don't want to dominate the thing here, but I had the 6 categories as to why people are choosing it. And there were the 2 push categories, pushing the government policies and behaviours in certain schools, not all schools. And then the 4 home-related ones. Just want to make that contrast that it's between the issue of what's going on in institutions outside of the family, that is the government and schools, versus what's happening in the institution of the family that's attracting some parents back into homeschooling in big numbers.
Yeah, one thing I didn't say either is that there is a bit of an exodus from the public schools, I would say, more than the private schools. And so it's a lot cheaper to homeschool than it is to send your kids to a expensive private school. And so it's the economics of homeschooling as well is a great, you can give your kids a good Christian education and by homeschooling and at a fraction of the cost, so.
Wonderful. Look,
well,
it
costs the family.
Well, the mum can't.
Where we relegate ourselves to a single income family, but we do it because we want to. And here's a little pithy statement, which is, it might cost, but it really pays.
All right, look, we're coming to the end of our program, and I promised you to get on by 8. As a final, and I'm going to say I'm going to be praying for both of you because the work that you're doing is fundamental, I think, because I've just become a granddad, and I'm almost thinking I might homeschool my granddaughter, but I don't know if I've got the patience, but I'm sure she's wonderful, and I could spend hours with her. So, I'd be delighted to if my son would let me, or my daughter-in-law, but there's a lot going for it. And the more I've studied about homeschooling, the more I think it's appealing. Can I ask you both, what final advice would you give to parents that are thinking, or grandparents, or to homeschool their children? What final piece of advice? Michelle, you first. Yeah.
Well, I think that you're always going to be a bit scared when you choose to homeschool because it's a bit weird and not everybody else is doing it. But it will be really good. Make connections with people and find a mentor who can do it, because you need community. Doing this on your own will get exhausting, and so having a community around you, a co-op, another group of Australian Christian they have great community there because they have sporting things and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, find yourself a good community, and then sort of don't buy all your curriculum all at once. Have a bit of time just to sort of think about where you want to go with it, and take the plunge. You can always send them back to school.
Thank you, Michelle. Final word from you, please, Terry.
I've got to agree 100% with Michelle. And she said, take the plunge. I'll say, have a go. You have nothing to lose. And I also will say this, save your children's heart. Save your children's heart. We do not want our children to be materialistic, Marxist, people who have no sense of history or purpose. Save your children's heart.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Michelle. You've been wonderful. As I said, I will be praying for you, and this has been recorded. I'm going to send you both a copy. Feel free to share it, and I'll be in touch with both of you privately after this. So God bless you both. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody else who's registered. The video will be made available very shortly, and I'll advise all those that have registered to access the video. Once again, thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank you.
Michelle. Bye, Greg.
Good.
Bye, everybody.